Yes, welcome everyone. If you've come here for the latest of the RASC Special Speakers Series, you're coming into the right Zoom room. If you've come for some other purpose, you've come into the wrong Zoom room, and you might want to check with your employer or
or enjoy
or special interest group as you may. And on the other hand, please stick around. Folks are coming in at a pretty good clip at this point. I'm always impressed watching the numbers crank up here and such. In the meantime, we can entertain folks with, I don't know, perhaps some sea chanties or other. In the meantime.
I was practicing my sea shanties on the piano last night. I mean, it's when you get into the third round of Eyes the By, the other people in the house tend to tell you stop.
Well, fair enough. I mean, that's really the purpose of sea chanties, is to test the limits of endurance in social isolation. That's really the. In fact, I suppose that's literally true, since they were sung by sailors isolated out at sea. So,
good point. Good point.
We're getting way too philosophical about sea chanties here. It's sea shanty talk that you've all come in. I hope that's what you were signing up for. I've got a first question of the evening. I noticed in our Q&A box. It's from Lou MacDonald asking, "Do you know any good Trump jokes?"
Let's not go there.
How would you know? Like what counts as satire anymore, June? I don't. Let's see. We've got some other comments here in the comments channel. Some folks are saying hello and welcome to us all. Hello, everybody. Glad to see you all here.
And Heather does.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I will remind folks, as Jenna is always careful to remind folks at the starts of these sessions, that your default on the chat box is probably set to communicate just with the panelists. And so if you're hoping to chat with everybody, just change the little blue pull-down menu there to say all panelists and attendees. And that way, everyone will see your chats. I mean, of course, if you just want to chat with us, maybe to tell us to stop talking about sea chanties, we'll understand. But otherwise, do change your menu. The numbers seem to be stabilizing a bit, but we'll give a few more minutes to allow folks to trickle in. And I know some folks, of course, prefer to watch on the YouTube channel, so we'll let them do that. But in the meantime, we'll just hold steady here. Oh, thank you so much, Louis, for the compliment. Really appreciate that. How many people are we at? Andrew asks. Currently, there are 62 people in this webinar. Sorry about that, Heather. Don't cover your ears.
Sorry, you just went through the roof. That's all right.
There's no one here.
Awesome.
There's no one here but Alendria and I. They were the only ones here.
Excuse me while I go take my Ativan.
Hello from Mascouche, Quebec. Oh, bonsoir. Where are people from? I've got a Victoria saying hello. London, Ontario.
Nova Scotia.
Excellent, excellent. Hello from Yarker, where we just had a blizzard. Oh no, we had a little sprinkling in the middle of the afternoon here in Toronto. Kitchener, Montreal, Yellowknife. Welcome, Yellowknife. Love Yellowknife. I've spent some time there. Winchester, Ontario, Kelowna, St. John, Mississauga. Not so fancy. Oh, well, it depends on what you consider fancy, Howdy from Winnipeg. Good to see all of the country being represented here. Ottawa.
Beside the Parliament buildings.
Oh.
Hi, Sharon.
Dominion Observatory. Excellent.
Alberta. Hi, Joan and Doug.
Yes. Yeah. So as folks know, we're just giving two more minutes here to let a few folks trickle in, and then we're going to get started. This is already it's hard to imagine, it's the third of our special speaker series since we started all of this. They've been going great. People seem to really enjoy us doing this, so we're going to keep doing it for a while. In fact, we have a couple of interesting twists to the special speakers series that you're going to hear about in the next couple of weeks. The folks behind the scenes, such as Jenna and other folks in the office, have been cooking up some new ideas. So stay tuned for those. We've got Montreal. We've got TO. Oh, it's a relative of mine from TO. Hi, Alice.
We've got Erik Briggs from Buffalo.
Erik from Buffalo. Very good.
New York.
So you're across the border right now, Erik? And let's see, I'm hiding in Heritage Point. Don't hide. There's no need to hide. It's not that bad. Pickering, good, good. Again, just giving a few more minutes here as we wait for everyone to log in. Malton, numbers are still climbing. But I think we are now 5 minutes past the hour, so I think it's reasonable for us to start, and others can continue to trickle in as they come. Welcome, everybody. I'm Phil Groff. I'm the Executive Director of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. Of course, if you've shown up in this room, you probably know you're here for a Royal Astronomical Society of Canada event, so that's probably no surprise to you. This is the third of our speaker series. We have a wonderful presentation for you this evening. As always, for these series, I'm joined by my co-host representing the other sponsors of this series, Sky News Magazine, Managing Editor Alendria Brunes. Hi, Alendria.
Good evening. Nice to see everyone here.
Excellent. Alendria will be wearing her journalism hat later and running the Q&A session at the end of the talk, which brings me to how to work the webinar. If this is your first time here, if you move your mouse around on the Zoom screen, not only will you do things like highlight our names on our boxes and such, but you will also see some buttons for you at the bottom of the screen. In particular, you'll see a button labeled chat. And if you click on that, you'll be able to chat with the other participants, the panelists, whoever you like. You can even chat one-on-one with individuals if you want, although I encourage you to talk openly. The idea is to make this kind of a party atmosphere. And the other button I'd call your attention to is the one that's labeled Q&A. So we'd ask you to use that button and enter your questions there. It makes it easier for Alendria and I to monitor them over the course of the evening and make sure we get them all asked before we get out of here. And so with all of that out of the way, no further ado, I'm going to turn us over to our speaker for the evening. Big breath, ready to go? Ladies and gentlemen, I give you former director of the board of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada and national member of the society and an astronomer, an amateur astronomer in her own right. I give you Heather Laird.
Hey.
Take it away, Heather.
I'm struggling with some lighting here. The sun finally decided to come out. Hello, everybody.
Excellent. Take it away, Heather.
Oh, wow. Okay, so start the presentation right now. I will do that. Give me a second. I gotta share screen. So I'm gonna be talking about, why is this not coming up? Of course, we practiced this yesterday, Phil.
Absolutely. So the button at the bottom of the screen, share screen.
No, I know, but my program's not showing up. Let me restart Keynote. Sorry, everybody.
Not a problem. We can continue riffing for a few minutes while you
Please
get this set up and going.
I can point out the latest edition of Sky News has a pretty cool feature, if I can find it here. And you'll have to excuse me, I've only got the proofs right now because COVID meant that I didn't get my copies of the magazine yet. But one of the features is a Q&A with two amazing scientists. They are Dr. Katie Mack and Dr. Sara Seager. And so they kind of go over what, and so it's, two strong female astrophysicists. And it's really neat. I like to think that they're talking about life, the universe, and everything, but really it's the past, the present, or the past, the future, and how it informs the present. So pick up your latest edition of Sky News. There's my plug.
Well,
okay, I got it.
You're ready to go? Excellent.
Yeah, I think so. I'm gonna start this, and then I'm gonna share my computer sound as well.
Good.
Share and play. So I'm going to be talking about Canadian women in astronomy over the last century or so. And I'm just going to get right into it. So during the early 20th century in Canada, the influence of the British through colonialism was strong. There were many societal rules or assumptions that were passed on from time to time. And eventually these began to fizzle out through each generation. And in the early days, women weren't permitted, at least in England, to receive a degree of any sort. And there were a lot of cultural expectations and barriers they later had to break down. I'll mention some of the major milestones for Canadian women in the 20th century, like women were first legally recognized as people in Canada as of 1929. That's close, but not even 100 years ago. And the first, give me a second, sorry everybody. The first Black woman elected to provincial legislature as a member of the NDP was Rosemary Brown in 1972. And sexual harassment in the workplace is finally recognized in 1987, and employers are finally held responsible if they tolerate this kind of derogatory behavior. The first Indigenous woman sits in the House of Commons. Her name was Ethel Blondin in 1988. And then in 1990, we've got Dr. Roberta Bondar, who becomes the first Canadian female astronaut. There's obviously other milestones, but we're still working on it. Do I have the wrong presentation up? I'm going to be very angry if I do. So I've got some quotes that I have put in here because I think they're very important. And it just kind of break things up. But the first person I'm going to go into is Charlotte Small. Charlotte was the Métis wife of surveyor and famous British Canadian explorer David Thompson, who was one of the first women in Canada to have her name associated with recreational astronomy, in my opinion. It's hard to find any detailed information on Charlotte and her family, despite her being recognized as a person of historical significance by the government of Canada. The records just aren't there. Her father, Patrick Small, did work for a fur trade company that was in competition with Hudson Bay Company at that time. And there isn't much information on her mother other than her Cree heritage. There is a map. Oh, I've got the wrong presentation up, everybody. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Take a moment. And,
oh my goodness. There it is. Come on. Yeah, got it. So I'm gonna close this and then we're gonna try again.
Well, the subject was the same. So
yeah. I just don't want to pummel everybody with a bunch of words. And let's see if we got this one now. Come on, share. Bom. Okay. I'm sorry. So yeah, there is a map made by Arcturus Consulting that you can purchase called Moccasin Miles, the Travels of Charlotte Small. It's the only researched and public record of her journeys across Canada, and she often traveled with her husband and their 13 children on expeditions, and they used the knowledge of the night sky to navigate. So the next three ladies I'd like to bring up are Cora Beamer, Ava Brooke, and Helen Stennett. They were a group of selenographers based out of Simcoe, Ontario. They actually used RASC members Dr. James Wadsworth's 12-inch silver on-glass equatorially mounted reflector to sketch these lunar features that you see in the 1890s. At the time, this telescope that they used was one of the largest in Canada. Sadly, there's not too much more known about these women or their background in astronomy. But they, I feel, are definitely a few of the forerunners of your modern day astrophotographers and sketchers. Here's another image. We don't know who exactly sketched it, but it's beautiful. And I was lucky enough, I actually tweeted out these slides a while ago on Twitter, and Clark Muir, who's the chair of our history committee here at RASC, actually sent me some information. And I guess Ava Brooke actually has a museum named after her in Norfolk County in Simcoe. And yeah, so she's got kind of a background in arts. I wasn't able to find any information on her when it comes to astronomy, but I thought that was pretty cool because it was exciting to find out more about Ava. So now I'm going to go on to some of the women who had to push their way into academia in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And the first person is Elizabeth Laird. There's no relation, although I wish there was. I very much like her last name. She was a Canadian physicist born in Owen Sound, Ontario in 1874, whom spent most of her academic career in the United States. But she's known for her spectroscopy and magnetism research. In 1893, Elizabeth graduated from London Collegiate Institute and afterward attended University College at U of T. But due to her gender, she was denied a scholarship, which could have allowed her to study abroad. And from 1898 to 1899, she worked with Max Planck. And yes, it's that famous German theoretical physicist we all know for his early work on quantum theory. And Emil Warburg they worked on time lag and magnetization. And in 1901, she earned her PhD in physics. She was the first woman accepted by J.J. Thomson. He was an English physicist and fellow at the Royal Society of London. And it was to conduct research at Cambridge University's Cavendish Laboratory. And then Elizabeth chaired the Department of Physics at Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts, USA, for nearly 40 years, which is amazing. The next lady I would like to bring up is Dr. Bert Douglas. Dr. Douglas was raised and educated in London, England, but moved back to Canada where she attended Westmount Academy in Montreal. She moved on to study mathematics and physics at McGill University. Her studies were interrupted by World War I, and at the age of 23, she was awarded the Order of British Empire for her work at the War Office as a statistician. She was the first woman to obtain a PhD from a Quebec university, which was in astrophysics in 1925 at McGill, where she stayed as a lecturer in physics and astrophysics until 1939. She was also the Dean of Women at Queen's University until 1958, where she was absolutely instrumental in having more women accepted into science and engineering, as well as she was a professor of astronomy from 1946 until her retirement in 1964. A few years later, she became an officer of the Order of Canada and was named one of 10 women of the century by the National Council of Jewish Women. There's an asteroid 3269 that's named after her, and she also has a Venusian crater named after her, as shown on this slide. She was a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society of Britain, and she had been president of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada from 1943 to 1944, so only a year, but that's still awesome. And she was a very active member of the Kingston Center. It was largely due to her work that the center was formed in 1961. And she's also very well known for her popular lectures, radio talks, and articles due to her enthusiasm for her interests, and became a historical first on many positions and committees. And the next woman I'd like to bring up, I unfortunately don't have a picture of, so if somebody out there does, I would love it, is Miriam Berlin. She was a member of the RASC Ottawa Center. She was a student of Dr. Bert Douglas, who I just mentioned at McGill, before joining the astrophysics division of the Dominion Observatory in 1927. And she was the first female astronomer on staff. Her research focus there was photoelectric photometry of Cepheid variables using the 38 centimeter refractor until she was transferred during World War I to the seismology division. She then returned to astronomy afterward and took part in meteor work with other members of the Ottawa Center, and they produced regular reports from the Dominion Observatory on that. And then later, Miriam was presented with the RASC Service Award in 1963 as she contributed greatly to the society in many, many ways. And the next woman I'm going to bring up, most people know, Dr. Helen Hogg. She's originally from the US. She moved to Victoria, British Columbia after she graduated with her doctoral degree and began research at the Dominion Astrophysical Observatory. Dr. Hogg was known for her work on globular clusters, variable stars, and her extraordinary public outreach efforts. She found 132 new variable stars in the globular cluster Messier 2, which is awesome. The DAO, which is the Dominion Astrophysical Observatory, they wouldn't offer her a job. And sadly, she had to complete all of this as a volunteer assistant to her husband, Frank Scott Hogg. They later moved to Toronto in the 1930s. She became one of the first astronomers to travel and work around the world to advance her research. And then she became assistant professor in 1951 at the University of Toronto and full professor in 1957. She wrote columns in newspapers, the Journal of the RASC, and also hosted an educational series on Canadian television in the 1970s. She published more than 200 papers, and she was one of the leading authorities in astronomy at the time. And Helen was also the founder and first president of CASCA, which is the Canadian Astronomical Society, and the first female president of the Royal Canadian Institute from 1964 to 1965. And she also served as president of the RASC from 1957 to 1958, and was honorary president from 1977 till 1981. The RASC, the society, actually honors Dr. Hogg with their main annual lecture at each General Assembly. I have also included a little bit of basics about some of their research. So what is a globular cluster? It's a spherical collection of stars that orbit a galactic core as a satellite. They're tightly bound by gravity and contain stars that are much older than the less dense stars found at the center of that cluster. And a variable star is a star whose brightness fluctuates over time as seen from Earth or the observing point. And this fluctuation is caused by a change in the emitted light or something partly blocking that light, which is always exciting. The next woman I would like to bring up is Isabel Williamson. Isabel was an incredibly active member of RASC's Montreal Center beginning in 1942, and so much so that she received the Chant Medal in 1948 and the Service Award in 1981. She organized groups and reported observations of aurora and meteors to scientific bodies for 25 years, and her efforts here were thought to be outstanding by professionals, and they greatly valued her work. She started a Messier Club in the 1940s, which was one of the first of its kind in Canada at the time. And her center named their observatory after her in 1987. And astronomer and RASC member David Levy dedicated his book, The Joy of Gazing, to her. And next up is Dr. Ruth Northcott. Dr. Northcott joined the University of Toronto's astronomy department as a computer after earning her master's in 1935, and her research focused on radial velocities and spectroscopic binaries. She compiled meteor and variable star observations from amateurs to produce one of the first radial maps in galactic coordinates. And she was a teacher and very active member of the RASC, and she had some strong ties with the RASC's Observer's Handbook, and also served as president of the society. She was awarded the Service Award in 1967, and there is also another annual lecture that RASC has at their general assemblies in her honor. So what's spectroscopy? It's the study of the interactions between matter and light. Astronomical spectroscopy measures the light that radiates from stars and other hot objects. And with this, they can determine the chemical composition of that object along with temperature, density, mass, distance, luminosity, and relative motion. And spectroscopic binaries, or this is radial velocity, I'm jumping too soon. This is the rate of change of distance between the object and the observing point here on Earth. Spectroscopy radial velocity is used to measure the frequencies of the light received from that object to determine how quickly the object is moving and if it's moving away from us or toward us. And then we'll go to spectroscopic binaries. These are systems with stars so close together that they appear as a single star. So that's also known as binary stars. And using the methods mentioned previously, they can determine if there's a companion by observing its gravitational influence on the motion of that primary object. And Mary Gray. So Mary Gray was an incredibly active member of the RASC Ottawa Centre as well, and developed her interest in the Society and astronomy when she began working for the Geodetic Survey of Canada at the Dominion Observatory, and she was a civil engineer. Eventually, she moved to the National Museum of Science and Technology in 1974, where she became the head of the astronomy division and later the senior curator of physical sciences. And this is something that Alendria will very much be excited about. Mary Gray is also the founder of Sky News, the newsletter, which was later expanded into a magazine after it was bought and taken over by Terence Dickinson after Mary retired. And then the RASC and Terence in 2015, RASC purchased Sky News, and this was at a General Assembly in Halifax, and I was there, and it was very cool. And just as Alendria mentioned earlier, here's your Sky News magazine today. So Mary was also awarded the Merit Award by the Civil Service Association of Canada in 1989 in recognition of her promotion of astronomy at that museum. And she also received the Service Award in 1990 from RASC for her devotion to the Society. And then we've got Mary Lou, who's amazing. Mary Lou joined the Halifax Centre in 1985 and has become a life member, holding many different positions within her own center. And then she eventually ran nationally in 2006. She was the national president of RASC from 2010 to 2012 during a very critical period when changes had to be made quickly to RASC's governance structure according to revisions made by Canadian federal laws. Mary Lou actually introduced the executive director position, which is now Phil, who you met earlier. I've had the pleasure of working with Mary Lou when I first joined National Council. This was years ago. And she's inspired me since. I was able to find a summary of Mary Lou's contributions, which was made by her colleagues, Roy Bishop, David Chapman, James Edgar, and David Lane. This isn't all of them, but I just wanted to kind of point a couple of things out. Mary Lou once read in an astronomy column by Terence Dickinson that one could see the Galilean moons of Jupiter with a pair of binoculars, and she looked and quickly became hooked on astronomy. She advanced her knowledge of astronomy with courses at St. Mary's University, and her observations of stars with the telescope at the Bert Gaffney Observatory resulted in 2 papers in the RASC Journal and the Chant Medal. Mary Lou had a vision that the RASC needed such a person to move the society forward, working in concert with the executive director and others. Mary Lou was also instrumental in creating the first strategic plan the society had seen in many years. And I know Mary Lou is watching, so that's awesome. Hi, Mary. So the next, oh yeah, there's these photos. I was able to get these from Patrick Kelly. He sent them to me not that long ago. This is Mary Lou with David Levy. I actually don't know where this is, but this is an awesome, awesome photo. And I think this is my favorite because I find it a little metaphorical, and Mary Lou's just owning it. And we've got some of her publications on the RASC e-store too, so please check those out. We've got Mary Lou's new telescope, Skyways, and she also created the Moongazer. Okay, so now I'm gonna move into some of the women who've explored the cosmos recently on a professional level. The first lady I'd like to bring up is Mercedes Richards. She was originally born in Jamaica. Mercedes moved to Toronto, Ontario to continue her university education. She obtained her Master of Science degree in space science at York University in Toronto. And by 1986, she had earned her PhD in astronomy and astrophysics from U of T. She later became a professor at Penn State University in the US and worked vigorously toward awareness for women and minority groups within her scientific field. Her expertise resided in binary stars, stellar and computational astrophysics, exoplanets, and brown dwarfs. She was also the first person to use tomography, which was mostly used in medicine and archaeology at the time, in astronomy to observe a binary system as it moved in relation to Earth to prove how the gas flowed between the two stars. And she also helped make the decision to demote Pluto. Sorry. The next person I'd like to, oh wait, yeah, what's a binary star? It's when two objects, stars or black holes, asteroids or galaxies, are close enough together that their gravitational movement causes them to orbit one another, which you've got a sweet image there. And then we've got Roberta Bondar. So Dr. Bondar is Canada's first female astronaut, as we all know, and she was also the first neurologist in space. She had been selected by NASA in 1990 when she performed experiments in the Space Lab during the Space Shuttle Discovery mission STS-42 in 1992. And we all know of her and her extraordinary efforts to educate the public on environmental matters and her adventures. And there's many, many schools named after her. And for over a decade after her space mission, she led an international team of NASA researchers to understand the body's ability to recover from exposure to space. And she was also the first astronaut to receive the honor of having a star on Canada's Walk of Fame. And then I think we've got a commemorative coin that was released in her honor, which is beautiful. And I think it glows in the dark. Thanks to the Royal Canadian Mint there. And then we've got Julia Payette, another astronaut, and also currently our Governor General here in Canada. Julie completed 2 space flights, STS-96 in 1999 and STS-127 in 2009. And her job was to operate the Canadarm from the space station. And she also worked as Capcom in Houston for a while. And in the 1980s, she was a systems engineer for IBM Canada's Science Engineering Division. And there's also a school named after her to recognize her work in Whitby, Ontario. And then I've got Victoria Caspi. Dr. Caspi is originally from Texas. Her family moved to Canada when she was young. Her research focuses on neutron stars and pulsars. In 2006, she was named the Lorne Trottier Professor of Astrophysics, and she is also a fellow in the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research. On February 22nd, 2016, she received the Gerhard Herzberg Canada Gold Medal for the science and engineering for her research on neutron stars. So what's a neutron star? It is the result of a smaller blue giant star going supernova. It's still a star, and it's so compact that they are the smallest and densest stars known to exist in the universe. They are composed entirely of neutrons. They're incredibly hot and are supported against further collapse. A pulsar is a rotating neutron star, which is what you can see in this X-ray image on this slide. It's emitting beams of electromagnetic radiation, which can be detected. So this is what you're seeing as a pulsar in action, which is sweet. And this actually, when I was creating these slides, this popped up. So this was her announcement when she won that award, which was awesome. And the next woman I'd like to bring up is Dr. Wendy Freedman. Dr. Freedman is an astronomer and University of Chicago professor. She is best known for her measurement of the Hubble constant and as a director of the Carnegie Observatories in California and Chile. Her research focuses mainly on measuring current and past expansion rates of the universe and dark energy. She was initially the leader of an international project to build the giant Magellan telescope until she stepped down in 2015. So what's the Hubble constant? It pertains to Hubble's law, which is considered the first observational basis for the expansion of the universe. Objects, it's a unit of measurement to describe it. And objects in deep space are found to have a Doppler shift, interpretable as relative velocity away from Earth. So red, which is the red shift that you see in this image. And the object shown here is the farthest object yet known, as imaged by the Hubble Space Telescope. It's 13.3 billion light years away from Earth, and it was formed 420 million years after the Big Bang. And we've got Sara Seager. Dr. Seager is very well known for her work on exoplanets and their atmospheres. She's referred to as an astronomical Indiana Jones by NASA's Planet Quest. She received her PhD in astronomy from Harvard University in 1999, and she developed a parallel version of the Drake equation to estimate the number of habitable planets in the galaxy, which is known as the Seager equation. I'm not going to show it here because I don't understand it and it's long, but that's super cool. She's currently a professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And what's an exoplanet? It's any planet that orbits another star other than our sun. And I had to show this because this artist's conception is just beautiful. And then we've got Dr. Jocelyn Reid. Dr. Reid is a fellow Calgarian, where I'm from. She's one of the many people, very many people named on the now infamous observation of gravitational waves from a binary black hole merger, published earlier, or sorry, in February 2016. So I think it's LIGO or LIGO detectors observed gravitational waves for the first time, along with the first observation of two black holes merging, confirming Einstein's 1916 prediction of gravitational waves based on his theory of general relativity. Dr. Reid's research focuses on neutron star astrophysics and how they play their part in gravitational waves. And she's also an assistant professor at California State University in the Gravitational Wave Physics and Astronomy Center. And just because, okay, wait, hang on. We got to talk about gravitational waves. What are they? They are ripples in the space-time curvature as predicted by Einstein with his theory of general relativity. And many of you have probably already heard this, but I had to include it because when they made this discovery of these black holes merging, they were able to listen to it. So let's listen to that now. Super neat, hey? Okay, I'll move on. I'm almost done, don't worry. I'm gonna bring up Tonya Harrison. Tonya is a planetary scientist who has focused her research on Martian geomorphology, which is the study of landscapes on Mars, terrestrial analogs, spectroscopy, and glaciology. She's also the manager of science programs with Planet Labs. She's helping increase research of their observation satellite data and use of it. She was previously the director of research at Arizona State University's Space Technology and Science Initiative, and was on the science team of the Mars Opportunity and Curiosity rovers. And she's superiorly active in public education and outreach initiatives, and also a fantastic professional photographer. She completed her education here in Canada and the US. A couple of years ago, I actually was able to meet her at the Calgary GA and seeing her speak, which was amazing. And I honestly look up to Tonya so much because of her science communication and public outreach efforts, because she's totally brilliant at it. And then I just wanted to bring this up because this is kind of the same stuff that she studies. So this is an image series taken of slopes located in Newton crater on Mars in 2011. And it may be evidence of warm season, salty liquid, water maybe flows that are active on Mars today. And the last person I'd like to bring up is Michelle Kunimoto. Her research, she's a student at the University of British Columbia, and her research is focusing on exoplanets with the Department of Physics and Astronomy. She's already discovered 4 new planets as an undergraduate student using Kepler light curve data, which is the measurement of star brightness over time, and searching for signs of planetary transits. And as of March 1st, 2020, according to a CBC article that I just recently read, she discovered 17 new possible planets, and 1 may have water. And she just used publicly available online data that was available from NASA. And so how do we see a transit? As you can see in this little graph here, it's brightness over time. So essentially people are looking for little dips in these graphs, because then we can see if something's passing or if something's causing that dim in brightness. And if you are interested at all in variable star research or data collection, or just want to learn more, please check out the AAVSO, which is another organization I'm part of, which is the American Association of Variable Star Observers. And I think that's it. There's so many more women that should be mentioned, but I'd be doing this for the whole day. So that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Heather. That was wonderful. So I'm going to turn things over to Lendria to start off the question and answer, and I'm going to ask folks to please use the Q&A panel to ask some questions.
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, the Q&A, it should be right down here. And if you put questions in there, I'll be looking through them, and then we can ask Heather. The first one, there were also some questions that were sent before the event even started, and so I might go to one of those. And so this one came from June MacDonald in New Brunswick. Are female professional astronomers treated differently in Canadian astronomy circles? Have different experiences compared to male astronomers? And do they have to deal with prejudice, harassment, bias against them? Do they have to spend a lot of time proving themselves? And do they have less choice of jobs or opportunities? And I mean, that's something that you spoke about kind of at the beginning of your presentation, and everything that women would have had to face. Do you feel that
I think I obviously can't speak because I'm not a professional, but at the same time, I've been following what's been going on, and absolutely they still have a lot of hurdles that they experience, and it's tough.
Mm-hmm. What, I guess, just to follow up to that, like, what can we do, both as women and as men who support women in the industry as well? What can we do to kind of help each other be less? How do we help each other?
I think it's about well, first of all, awareness,
mm-hmm.
And as well as elevating those voices that are necessary, and just support each other, and it's not just women. I mean everyone, right? So yeah, I think just be aware and try harder for you know what I mean. But it's tough for women for sure.
Mm-hmm. Can you provide, and I mean, I don't know if this is about astronomy, but can you provide an example of how women can be elevated in the field of astronomy, like in terms of, like you use the word
more talks with women in it, so like if you're having an event, make sure you've got women that are your speakers. If it's just one, maybe recheck that. It shouldn't just be one. Mm-hmm. It's just, equality is important, so we should be matching that in all of these organizations when we're trying to represent what we enjoy and love.
Thank you. The next question, again from June: is it different in the amateur astronomy community?
No.
Okay. Next question, again from June: do Canadian female astronomers have a more difficult experience than in other countries in the world? That, I guess, that's to the best of your knowledge.
Honestly, I think it's all across the planet, because again, we've got other cultures, other things going on. So yeah, no, I think we probably have a little bit more of a foot in the door than some places, but it's still, we've got a long way to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Margaret Thompson here in the chat, she also mentions like encouraging local RASC or other astronomy groups to highlight women in science and astronomy and keep educating. And so that's a great way to bring women's voices to places where they can be heard. I'm going to go to, this is a question from Alice. She says, I really admire both Bondar and Pett. And are there any young Canadian women currently in the space program?
Yes, I would say so. I just don't know who they are right now.
I have, there was a Sky News article just maybe about a month ago about, and it spoke about Dr. Jennifer City Gibbons. And so she's one. I'll just take that and post it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there we go. Somebody else just mentioned it too.
We've got the chat helping out. Thank you very much.
So, and yeah, I just threw her biography up there too.
Perfect.
Question from me, I guess. You mentioned that the women in Simcoe were selenographers. I had to Google that, but I'm also wondering if you could explain what a selenographer is, and then also, like with those early sketches from the women in Simcoe, how good would their telescopes have been to make those kinds of sketches?
I'm actually going to get my co-host to jump in. Where's Randall? Because he will be able to answer that question a lot better than I can.
I'm actually Heather's footnote. Well, more or less animated footnote. Yeah, I guess there's two questions there. The telescopes were very good. Enough that one, Dr. Wadsworth's telescope doesn't survive, but other instruments of that vintage do survive. And they're diffraction limited. They're optically very good. Peter Sarafola was buying up some old ones and restoring them at this moment, actually. A lot of them are specialized for planetary observation, like looking at the moon. Well, selenography was under the umbrella of planetary observation. How good
and so selenography, again, that's the person who studies, or like a selenographer is someone who studies charts the surface of the moon.
You could look at it as in some ways as a counterpart to a geographer, if you like. Now, obviously, in that period, they couldn't go visit the moon except in imagination. They could look at it from afar. How good they were as recorders of the lunar surface. I mean, is anyone who's tried to draw what they've seen at an eyepiece knows it's actually not easy. And in a way, we're battling what the astrophotographers are battling, which is the atmosphere. And in that equation, the question of how good they are, there's also the issue of how good an artist they are. Of the three people whom Heather mentioned, one of them is clearly better than the other two, and I think it's Cora Beamer. I think I have to go back and look. It's the one who did the image of Mare Crisium, and there's a nice digitization of that at fairly decent high resolution on the RASC website, which anyone could find and download.
All right. Well, thank you, Randall. I'm going to go to the live Q&A right now and ask a question from Jenna, because I think it's a good question. Which female astronomer has most inspired you personally?
Personally, I would honestly have to say Tonya Harrison. Just because there's so many buckets I can choose from there. But yeah, it would definitely have to be her for her science communication and all of her efforts.
Okay, thank you. Andrew Bennett asks, are women generally well represented in astronomy type programs in Canada? And again, I guess that would be to the best of your knowledge.
I would say we're getting better. We're getting better. Not quite, but we are getting better.
Okay. Thank you. Another question here from Jenna. What would you say to a young girl who might be interested in pursuing astronomy, either professionally or as a hobby?
Do it. Talk to your teachers about it. Talk to your parents about it. Keep talking about it, because if they can help you find a local center or astronomy club nearby and help you get the books that you need and just enjoy it and learn as much as you can, for sure.
Thank you. Another question Bettina here asks, apparently exoplanet research attracts more women, whereas cosmology is nearly all men. Are there other areas of astronomy where women are more present?
I actually wouldn't be able to answer that question, but that is a very good question, and I would love to know.
Yeah, I would also, that is a very interesting question.
I know in terms of the exoplanet research, at least one prominent female astronomer is Nathalie Ouellette, who was the coordinator of the Institute for Research on Exoplanets at the Université de Montréal, and also, of course, our Canadian liaison to the Webb Space Telescope. So,
thank you, and obviously Sara Seager as well in
of course,
exoplanet research. Question here from Sharon Odell: do you know of any other Indigenous women astronomers like Small?
I actually don't, because it's very hard to find information on them. It's just like there probably is, but the records aren't there. So, but at the same time, that's records I'm able to find on the internet, right? So like if I were able to go to different people that had the knowledge, I'm sure I'd be able to find it.
Yeah, it's record keeping can be a bit of what kind of holds us back too, in terms of like knowing what women have done in the field of astronomy. Because even if they were working or doing things, it wouldn't have necessarily made it.
They weren't considered important. Yeah, so the records aren't there.
One place that information might be found, it would take a lot of digging, is in the archives of the Hudson's Bay Company, which I think now, and they're in Winnipeg, and there's a lot of stuff about astronomy in there. And of course, Thomson ended up working for the Hudson's Bay Company. And I think they also they absorbed the Northwest Company, so it had that stuff there as well. Interesting thing about records, if you haven't got records, you can look for proxy indicators. So an indicator that would show there's an opportunity for someone to do astronomy, which could have been available. I'll just mention two, and this goes back to the early, well, before the earliest period of the colonizers that Heather talked about. So this is sort of at the very beginnings. In the 18th century, there was a periodical. It's quite a popular periodical called The Lady's Diary. I mean, it sounds ridiculous in some respects. It lasted for a very long time, I think for over a century. It started in 1707. It's a British publication. And what it did, now, it was aimed ostensibly at the female gender market. What it had in it was a lot of stuff that was mathematical, a lot of mathematical content, and a lot of it was incredibly difficult, and some of it required really advanced mathematics. In the 18th century, it's a large readership, and it was directed to women. Now, also men had subscriptions. That indicates something. If someone had access to that, they could have done, and of course at that time, astronomy was, a very large part of it was mathematical. That could have been an entry for someone, to that mathematical culture. Another entry were the books of dialogues. There were often things that, there's a male and female, character, and they discussed astronomy. One of the most important was Fontenelle's Plurality of Worlds. I think first showed up in 1686. If someone had access to that, they would have gotten quite a lot of astronomical knowledge. So did those works circulate in Canada is the question.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
And if they did, then there's a potential for someone at that time to have gotten into it.
Okay. Duly noted. There is a note on the YouTube chat from Haley Miller, a comment that Sara Seager she'll be speaking at the virtual GA 2020 on June 7th.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I was allowed to mention that, but yeah.
I don't know.
No.
If Haley's
mentioning it, it's all good.
So there it is. And let's see, I'll go back to the Q&A here. And this is a good question. This is from Andrew Bennett. What has RASC been doing to promote women or other minorities in astronomy? Or we should just say minorities. Specific programs or scholarships, like what's available?
I don't know about specific programs or scholarships right now, but I know a committee was struck, the Inclusivity and Diversity Committee, and they are working hard at figuring that stuff out for you.
Yes, which is a much better answer than the other one, which would be not nearly enough.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So. And
Alice asks, she may have missed this in the intro, but I don't think she did. What she asks what your day job is.
I am a legal assistant.
Into astronomy.
Yep, super into it.
Yep. And let's see, does the CSA promote women in astronomy as a segue into the astronaut program? This is from Lewis.
I would assume that they do. I don't know for sure, but I would think so, that they're doing stuff in regards to that.
Yeah. And Mariana asks, do we have any female astronomers scheduled for our talks?
Sara Seager.
Sara Seager would be there.
Yeah. Well, that's for the GA.
Yeah.
As for our speaker series, we don't have. We have Randall coming up at the next talk on May 21st.
Yeah.
And so he's going to be talking about
in late June, and more on that. I don't want to give anything away on that just yet. But we can say yes, there will be more female astronomers in that.
Yes, that's awesome.
Yeah. Oh. And I thought it was interesting. I pulled a few comments out of the chat. I did get them all because the chat was moving very quickly. But just little personal notes. Erik Briggs noted that Northcott identified some spectroscopic binaries using the telescope at DDO. Carl mentioned that when he was 14, he was greeted by Isabel Williamson when he visited the Montreal Center in 1962. He also said that she introduced him to David Levy in 1964.
Right on.
Friendship has lasted until today. And Alan Dyer said that Helen Hogg was the guest of honor and officially opened the then Edmonton Space Sciences Center in 1984.
Oh, so, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, a couple of little points there. And so just going through the questions, I think that might be Erik Briggs. Another note here, he says that on the night of July 2nd to 3rd, 1970, all 5 scheduled observers at the David Dunlap Observatory were Christine Coots, Dr. Christine Coots, Rosalind Schemmelt on the 74-inch, Nancy Evans and Gretchen Hagen on the 24-inch, and Kathy Reardon on the 19-inch telescope. And so that's who was there that night.
Cool.
Reading it out. And I think that might be about it. I think we've answered most of the questions that I'm seeing here. Jenna Hines asks, actually, what got you interested in astronomy in the first place?
Honestly, when I was younger, I was very interested in light, and then I was kind of veered away from the sciences just because of not enough, I guess maybe encouragement. People around me didn't really know what was transpiring in my mind. And it was later on in life, I ended up very ill and was unable to work. I had fibromyalgia, and I read a Carl Sagan book and decided to start investigating. And I found the RASC, and I talked to people at the universities because I was planning on doing a bunch of upgrading and all of that. And it's just stuck. I've loved it. Joining the RASC was what helped me keep the hobby and the interest alive.
Mm-hmm. That's great. It really kind of reopened the universe, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it gave me new life. It was awesome.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I think that's about it for the questions that I've got here. And so I guess really thank you so much for coming and doing this, having this conversation with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
And sharing.
Yes, thank you so much for being here this evening, and thanks everyone else for coming out tonight to hear this talk, the third of our special speakers series. we had hidden in the background, or not so hidden in the background, and you heard from him once or twice, Randall Rosenfeld tonight, RASC's curator of our telescope museum and also our archivist. He's going to be doing our next speaker series presentation on Thursday, May 21st at 7 p.m. It's going to be sort of a combination of history and philosophy as he talks about truth at the eyepiece, and really ponders the question of why is it when we look through our telescopes today, we don't necessarily see things the same way we see illustrated in old texts and such, that and old drawings and sketches made by folks from 100, 200, 300 years ago. We have a couple of other events coming up in the near future. On Monday, for those of you who are members of the Society and who've been coming out for some of the how to use the Observer's Handbook sessions that we host every Monday afternoon. This week, the topic is going to be dwarf and minor planets, meteors, comets, and dust, which I'm sure is more exciting than it sounds.
Always is.
On Tuesday, the Insider's Guide to the Galaxy for this week is Chris Vaughn talking about beginner's telescopes. So I hope you'll keep enjoying all of the various online offerings that RASC is making available right now, while we're still unfortunately unable to get together face to face, although we do look forward to being able to see people in person eventually. But stay tuned. We'll hear more about what's coming for the future of the Speakers Series later in June. And with that, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the staff and the board of the RASC. I'm Phil Groff, your co-host, along with Sky News and Alendria.
Thank you, Phil.
And this has been our special speaker series. Thank you once again to Heather Laird.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.